Leveraged Learning: How the Disruption of Education Helps Lifelong Learners and Experts with Something to Teach, by Danny Iny. Read by David H. Lawrence, the 17th. Foreword by Mitch Joel. I never let school get in the way of my education. If you do a generic search on my name, this is the quote most often attributed to me. I have no idea why. I obviously said it at some point from some keynote presentation stage or some tweet somewhere. It has grown with me over the years, and like all good things on Instagram, every few months it sprouts back up in some other way, and I'm forced to kindly remind everyone that these words were spoken by Grant Allen and Mark Twain more than a century before they came out of my mouth. Still, it stands as a fairly correct statement about my stance on formal education and the current way that educational institutions are run. I sucked at school, both elementary and secondary. I'd start off my early mornings with pangs of anxiety that manifested itself into stomach aches. I'd struggle to pay attention in class. I was often caught daydreaming. I just wanted out. It wasn't for me. In grade 4 or 5, I remember the English teacher calling my mother at home because I was not reading the book that was assigned to the class. If memory serves, the class was instructed to read John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. I didn't like it. I dug around and set my eyes on J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. The English teacher would have none of it. My mother came to my defense. At least, she told the teacher, he's reading something meaningful. I was an avid comic book reader, still am, and I think her response was simply out of shock that I wasn't caught reading X-Men or Iron Man when I should have been reading the classics. History's a funny thing. I think that we could all agree that X-Men and Iron Man are indeed classics as well. I had every intention of scraping through with a degree that started in philosophy. I had no idea what I would do with said degree, but it made a ton of sense at the time. I figured that this was one of the few degrees where all you had to do was be alone, read, and write. Sounded perfect. It was aligned with my personality. If you are an introvert, you do things very differently. You learn very differently. In fact, it's not just introverts. We all learn in very different ways. Education is impacted by age, gender, geography, and everything else that you can imagine. We tend to forget that formal education was basically established as a buffer. This buffer would keep children out of the workforce, but would, at the time, teach them as if they were already some kind of cog in an assembly line. Maybe that's not fact-based history, but it sure is how I philosophically think about school. Take boys and girls of the same age, line them up in desks, and have them memorize and read, and then figure out at the end of the day who is succeeding and who is falling behind. Ugh. The pangs and stomach aches are raging back. Back to college. My first year of post-secondary education was a bit of a blur. At the time, I was already publishing a rock music magazine. It was a full-time job, and I was loving it. For context, if you've ever seen the movie Almost Famous, that was, basically, my life. I was 17 when I landed my first professional, paid, job as a journalist. I interviewed Tommy Lee from Motley Crue, and, as I like to joke, it was all downhill from there. My days consisted of organizing interviews with musicians, selling ads for the magazine, ensuring that the printer was ready for the next issue, speaking to the magazine distributors, graphic designer, dealing with my business partner, and more. At night, you could usually find me at a show, concert, or event. How was I supposed to fulfill this rock and roll dream and proper entrepreneurial venture while also completing a college degree? I was drowning. I was failing.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?